and welcome to this episode on Attune In. I'm thrilled and grateful to be joined today by Parven Kaur. Good morning, Parven.
Hi there, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining the conversation. This is such an important one. So I'm going to read out your bio so listeners can understand the sort of background and all the expertise you bring to the conversation. Parvin Kaur is founder of Kids and Clicks, a web resource that helps parents and children thrive in a digital world. After graduating with a master's in corporate governance from the London School of Economics and Political Science, Parvin worked for Ernst & Young before moving into digital media consultancy. Parvin has extensive experience in the digital and social media arena and has been a consultant for various charitable organisations across Scotland. She has also been invited as a speaker at digital media events, and her work has been recognised as a digital pioneer by the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations. And more recently, following her foray into digital parenting, she was recognised by the Parenting 2.0 organisation for improving digital literacy. So lots and lots of expertise to such an important conversation, and congratulations on all the work you're doing, because I think Kids and Clicks is exactly what people need right now. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do at Kids and Clicks?
Yes, you know what? It has kind of evolved over the last number of years in terms of what it is that I do. Everything basically started back in 2018. So my background while I was working in the corporate sector and then moved on to the charity sector, I always had an interest in blogging for the fun of it. And as I was growing my blog and it grew to about 100,000 monthly views, I started realizing tips and techniques that people can use to just grow very fast online. And because of that, I started writing on the implications of all of this on Medium and on LinkedIn, and just very sort of what this means for a parent, because how easy it is to target someone online, how easy it is at the time to be on Google's first page and so on, using Pinterest and all of that. And I thought, I do wonder whether people do think about, the people who are actually doing this, how easy it is for them to actually target audience online. So as I started writing, there was quite a number of interests at the time, but it's not as big as it is now. When I started back in 2018, the online safety space have just moved quite, significantly after COVID. And at that time, it immediately caught the attention of internet matters and media and local media and so on. So then I started writing more based on my experience, everything that I see online. It can actually affect children and what parents should know about. And
Mm.
how Kids and Clicks basically started with me just sort of, sharing my experience, whether it's through my blogging experience or reading a news article or following a particular influencer and sort of dissecting what it actually means when they actually post these things. And, and we have to think back, at about almost, I would say, 7, 8 years ago, not many people were looking into this, but that's where I saw what, sort of what this, and I even wrote an online safety book for children back in 2018. Yeah, and before this, Kids and Clicks used to be just that. So, I used to share latest news and trends, but now it has evolved to quite a number of things. Whether it's supporting schools and colleges with online safety courses, and supporting corporate organizations with digital well-being. It all evolves organically as I grow in the space. So it's not something that I've always set out to do. So it's
Yeah.
something that just kind of came to me as I just, went into the space really.
Amazing. It's such a great example of following your flow state, your passion, and then also meeting a real need, because clearly this is a response to the need that's out there, the kind of response you were getting. And I think, as we're both parents, I mean, you were saying you have two children. Remind me their ages?
8 and 4, yeah.
As you know very well, when you're a busy parent, there's the invisible load, there's the visible load, there's so much. And actually, what parents really need is some guidance, which is actually feasible and practical within the context that they're in. Because I think every parent, with the knowledge and resources that they have, want to do the very best for their child. And it's sometimes about, is the right information landing with them in a way that they can actually make use of and apply in their homes. So I'd love, obviously this is your area, and I'd love to sort of hear from you. If there was a tired mum or dad listening to this and they're balancing work and parenting and trying to think about other things, what are the main priorities that you feel every parent could benefit from knowing And then are there any sort of specific action points that you can sort of recommend?
Yes, I think first of all is this understanding your child's digital media use. Now, but before we even go there, I think one thing that I would really like to share is that recently the Internet Watch Foundation shared that majority of online related harm happens in your child's bedroom. So I think that is something significant for a lot of parents to try to understand what that basically means. It's not the school, it's not at play dates, it's actually in your own home. So what I would tell parents is that this is it, right? When you give your child access to a connected device, it's like sending your child on a play date. It's just as simple as that. And what you do is when you before sending your child on a play date, there are a couple of questions, right? You ask yourself. This becomes automatic as your child grows. You don't ask these questions anymore. You just know who the family is and you send your child away because you trust them. But when you're doing it for the first time and say your child is in P1, they want to have a play date, you'd have a couple of questions like, who are these people, who she's playing with, where she's going, how long she's going to be there, is there going to be a parent, and so on. It's the same thing. When you give your child access to the internet, couple of key questions to ask yourself. Where are they going? Is it an app? Is it a game? Who are they
Mm,
going with? Are they going to be alone in that space? Are they going to be strangers in that space? Are they just going to be friends from their school in that space? Then you ask yourself, right? Can they be on their own or do you need to be there with them? Think about it this way. For example, when your child was little and you go to a soft play with them, when they're toddlers, you almost have to be in it with them through the slides and everything. But then when they become 5, 6, 7 years old, you kind of let them be in the, in the soft play area. You can sit on the side and have your cup of coffee or whatever it may be. It's the same thing as well. When you give your child access to the internet, you need to know whether they can be there on their own or you need to be there with them. An easy example is this, right? So when my daughter was 5 years old, and I introduced her to Khan Academy Kids app, and I needed to be there with her just to kind of help her, where to touch and and what to do. She didn't get it. But now she's 7 or 8, right? It's so easy. She can just be on it by herself. And I know it's a safe app and, she's going to be on her own. So those are the things like, and that's going to keep changing as your child grows in this particular space. And finally, what I would say is that, know some features of the app that you're going to introduce your child to. You don't have to be playing it all the time. You don't have to be on it all the time. But a couple of things you can have in mind. Is there any chat? Is there any addictive algorithm with this that makes them want to keep playing, want to keep going back to the space? And then is there any in-app purchases, for example, any violent language and so on? So once you have those key things in your mind, right, it becomes very automatic. The next time you want to hand your child over, for example, a tablet or a screen or whatever it is, you don't have to go through those questions again because you kind of know it already. It's like, when you send your child on a physical play date. So those are the first key things that you need to keep in mind that, that it's like sending your child on a play date. And, keep in mind that, majority of your online harms happen actually in your child's bedroom, which then brings on to the next thing. Since it's happening in your own home, one thing you want to do is secure your home. And you do this from your router and your VPN level first. You've got parental control, block settings, and so on. So whether it's BT or whether it's Vodafone or Sky and so on, right? They all almost have this. It's just whether which one's better and which one's not. If you're looking for a very specific dedicated router for parental control, then you can check out like Gigabit IQ. As far as I know, they're the only one. And you can sort of, you can set the settings sort of for each device. So for example, if you block the internet within certain hours, it doesn't mean your device have to be blocked. So you as an adult can carry on watching whatever you want to watch, but it's your child that doesn't get access to it. Things like that. Now, those things take a bit of time, right? But you do it once and then you're set for it, at least for, the next 1 or 2 years. You keep going back to it as your child grows up, but it's something that you just set once as well. And the next thing I would say is really finding what your child's actually interested in and then build on that digitally as well. See, I'm not about banning screens and things like that. I'm all about intentional use when it comes to screen. For example, if your child is interested in drawing and arts, right? So I've got an 8-year-old. What I do is I go onto YouTube and download some videos of drawing and art, and I download it on the iPad so she can scroll. And I switch off the Wi-Fi, and she gets to watch them. And she'll have a pen and a paper, and she'll start drawing while watching that video. Or if your child's a little bit bigger, you can introduce them, say, for example, Canva for graphic designing. If your child is into football, for example, there's an app called Top Decker where it teaches you football drills, so you can watch this while you are practicing your drills and so on. Find what your child is interested in and then build on that interest in the digital world. So it's not just about just handing them a device and then forgetting about it. All of this takes time, but once you sort of, tell yourself that I'm going to spend, say, for example, 1 hour on a Saturday morning doing all of this, that's kind of you set for quite a period of time, really.
Yeah, I think that's really key. That's really key for parents listening to this who may have a bit of a psychological block to the whole thing because it's such an important topic. And I know parents and they know it's so important and they think it's a much bigger mountain to climb than it actually is. So you're saying 1 hour on a Saturday could be done and then the family is automated in a way, then things can just flow. And actually, it sounds also as though there's a few little habits that can be sort of set and embedded. So the habit of downloading a video, turning off the Wi-Fi, and then your daughter can happily watch the intentional YouTube videos for art. I mean, that's a really good example that a parent can do straight away. And with just going back to the question around the routers, so you're saying every major supplier has a router setting. How can you just explain exactly to a parent where do they find that setting? Where do they go to set it?
So they're usually switched off by default. So that is why you need to find it to switch it on. Now, every provider will be quite different, whether it's BT or whether it's Vodafone. I'm not too sure where you will find for each of this, but usually if you contact your router provider, they'll be able to guide you how to basically do this. Yeah. So
Perfect.
yeah, because every provider will be quite different, but do keep in mind a lot of them will be switched off by default. But also do keep in mind with the router as well, right? You have to understand with each provider, they provide a different thing as well. So, for example, with some provider, it could be, blocking internet access within certain hours, but then that's switched off for the whole house. And that's not what you want either, because like you want it switched off, for example, for your kid, but you want to watch, say, Netflix at home and you will still want access. So it's really finding the provider that gives you that.
Okay, got it. So that it could be a phone call and a bit of a bespoke conversation.
Yeah.
Fine. Thank you so much. You made the comment that you're not pro banning. That's not necessarily what you agree with. What you think is intentional use where the parents are actually quite proactive. And I think when, parents are time poor and they're juggling a lot of admin, there's WhatsApp admin from school, there's work, there's a lot happening within that 12 hours that people are all awake or however many hours someone is awake for. Do you have any other sort of systems that you recommend, or do you have, in terms of with your own children or thinking about what works with other families that you work with, do you recommend having any sort of family system where all the children are also on board? Because I think children's autonomy here it's a really great example or a good reason for us to instill autonomy in our children. And sort of seeing this as a shared sort of tricky thing that we're all trying to work with and support, but actually children can step into this as well. And then it's about empowering them and helping them understand in an age appropriate way what little things they can be thinking about or doing to take responsibility as well. So do you have any thoughts around that or what works well or good examples?
Yeah, so I think, right, if you want to challenge yourself today, well, after you listen this, right, when your child come home from school today, or if you have a moment tonight, right, ask your child what they think about your phone usage. Ask them, do you think I'm using my phone a lot? And that's where you get feedback from your child. Because
Mm,
what we have to keep in mind is that we are the role models for our children. If they are seeing us on our devices all the time, that's what's going to feel normal to them. And you know what? And this is not an easy thing for parents as well, with the constant notification, the wanting to reply to emails and this and that, right? It's very, very hard to break that habit. And a lot of the time we end up saying 1 more minute or 2 more minutes, and then I'll come back to you and so on. That becomes normal for a child. And when you give them a device or you give them a tablet or you give them an online game, you're going to hear the same language being told back to you: 1 more minute, 5 more minutes. Why do you get it? And why is it that I don't get it? And then when you say things, well, I'm the adult and you're the child, that doesn't work by the time.
mhm.
That whole trust and communication just breaks down. So the first thing you got to do is look into your own digital habit and your own digital use. And once you get a feedback from your child, then work on that. and then get an agreement together with your child. What can I do to improve? Now, I've tried this. Like, I'm not perfect myself. I've tried this with my own 8-year-old, and I asked her, "Do you think, mommy and daddy uses our phone quite a lot?" And she said, "Sometimes." And I said, like, "When do you notice it? And she's like, "Well, sometimes when I want to talk to you, you're on a computer, like you don't look at me." And I'm like, "Oh, but I'm working, at the time." And becomes tricky. And now I'm mindful, right? Okay, there's someone actually trying to talk to me, and maybe this is becoming a distraction. But I also then set the boundary with her. You have to understand this is the time that I work, and so I'm not going to be paying any attention to you. You have to keep that in mind, and keep yourself busy. I'll come back to you in the next 30 minutes, and so on. So I think have an agreement together with your child when and where can devices be used. But most importantly, I would also say for any young person, right? Do not give them a device in the bedroom at night. So this is something that I think every family should just agree on. No child should have their mobile phone or their iPads or anything in their bedroom at night. I think everything should be stored and locked away at night. And it's the same thing. So what we've done in our household, not through the night, but for example, during dinner time, we don't usually have our phones with us. But just to show our children that we are physically keeping our phone away, we actually have a box and we actually just keep it there. And that's just to show them that, like we're keeping it away. And now we're just talking and just listening to each other, and that's it. But it
Mm.
takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So you gotta give yourself some grace as well. And don't be so hard on yourself, but do it together with your child. But first of all, try to understand what your child thinks about your own usage with devices and your relationship with technology. That will give you a really good indication where your child feels about your own device use. And then you go on together with your child and ask them, look, what do you think I can do so that you feel like I'm there with you? Do you want me to put my phone away during certain hours of time? Do you want me to be more present? Have that open conversation and then say like, okay, look, I understand what you're telling me and I agree with it or I don't agree with it and so on, and say, can we agree on something together where we both work on it together? So at the end of the day, digital well-being is not just for children, it's for grown-ups and for adults as well. We need to start having positive relationship with our devices. And I'm sure, like I've spoken to, as I'm doing more presentations, I'm getting a lot of questions from parents asking how they can handle their own devices. It's not just about children. Even parents are wondering about their own relationship with tech. And this is something you can both explore together with your children.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much there. I just want to sort of turn towards some of the things you said. What struck me when you were talking about your own experience is the fact that, you're working on your computer, you're working, right? And your child's saying, but you're on your computer. And then we always have to say, well, we're working. And that takes you to the fact that tech is for different reasons. There's not one, to a child who's trying to make sense of the world, they're seeing a screen, right? But we might be saying, oh, this is the grocery order, or this is I'm filling out a form because you have a school trip, or this is figuring out who's going on which play date tomorrow, and I need to figure out the party bags. And there's organization, there's sort of shopping, there's photos, there's so many things that we are using our technology for. And I think because now more of us are working from home, the boundaries are sort of all over the place. And I think what I'm thinking is it is what you're saying, which is you need more conversations, really respectful, balanced conversations where there isn't this hierarchy. I'm the parent, you're the child, because then, as you said, the trust it breaks down, the communication. We want to be talking in a way where our children are listening and it lands.
Yeah.
So hypocritical stuff isn't going to work, right?
Yeah.
So I almost sometimes with my children, I explain that, I'm not playing a game trying to get points. I'm literally trying to order stuff for you and for all, taking a selfie of my face. I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think we have to get quite granular with this because, as you say, we can't suddenly be anti-tech. Tech is part of our lives, and we probably need to get very granular about the different strands that tech has for each person. So for a child, sometimes they need to be on their iPad because their homework has been set and it involves going on Swiggle and doing some research. Okay. There's the education piece, there's the gaming, there's getting the reward, there's the streaks, there's the social media, which we should come on to in a minute. And then the other thing I'm intrigued about is children turning to their tech almost like as a retreat, because there is research which shows that for some children and adults actually, tech serves a purpose, sort of with emotional regulation. So if there's stress, if there's problems at home or at school, this is the way children, rather than processing the emotions, rather than communicating and dissolving things, actually what's happening is children are retreating into their tech and escaping and going into another reality. And that's the bit that me, with my sort of interest in, so my interest is in children developing the emotional literacy to manage their emotions so that when they're older, they've got a sort of a mental well-being profile where they can process their difficult feelings and they can move on and it doesn't impact relationships and connection. And I'm sort of worried a little bit about the way technology is sort of scuppering all that, because I see even adults are just escaping into their screens. And do you have any thoughts or reflections on that?
Well, I think the first thing that you mentioned is that, children, probably not getting head on with their own feelings, rather just escaping it to a different form of reality. That is when maybe they go through passive scrolling on, on social media or on YouTube, or probably go into a gaming platform and then forget about everything. But there are also apps that are designed for children to be like mindful about those feelings, whether it's a journaling app or whether, a app that basically gets them to reflect on their emotion during the day and record it, and and so on. But then when they sort of move into the other direction, when they are escaping reality, that is when it becomes really sort of dangerous. That is when they could end up in places, corners of the internet that could be really dark for them, and take them to a completely different belief system, altogether. It could be accidentally, someone could say something to them on a gaming platform that takes them into, say, a Discord channel or Telegram and so on, and then they join a particular community and stuff. It sounds really extreme, but it's not that far from reality either. It's very real, and that's how you get taken away to a different completely belief system. And I was talking to a school teacher who basically told me that one of his students was playing one of the sort of really violent video game, and that's his way of escaping his realities through gaming. But also on this particular gaming platform, he's on his headphone. And while he's on his headphones, there are strangers in the game because he's playing with others. It's quite a violent shooting game. And there are strangers basically talking into his ears that, oh, you're not worthwhile, your family hates you. Keep sort of, feeding those kind of information to him while he's there, playing this game and shooting people and stuff like that. And that could be really dangerous for, for anyone, not just for a child, even for an adult, when, your background is already quite vulnerable, and then you go into places like this that makes you even more vulnerable to these kind of, thoughts and behavior. And that is where I think we need to be really careful, and we really need to be mindful about these things, because what we have to know is that, like, screen time is not just watching. Screen time is when children actually, they take in those thoughts, those actions, and they try them out in the real world, and that kind of becomes their behavior, that becomes their worldview. And so, screen time is just not entertainment. And I think that's the one thing we have to just really keep in mind.
I agree. And I think, that example, we've got two scenarios, but it's the same thing. It's the iPad or the phone or whatever it is. But you can either be using it in a really good way, in a helpful way, or it can quickly. And that's the piece that I think is hard for parents, because what we're then sort of saying is, as parents, we need to be on it. We need to be absolutely on it as to what are they actually accessing. And if you're also juggling multiple, and I think that's the tension, because I don't think any parent would want that
Yeah.
to unfold in that way, but it's happening. And I think the resistance seems to be quite low for that to happen. I'm not sure. Obviously, you're the expert here, but as a cautious parent who is reflecting and thinking, do you know, I grew up with a brick phone when I was 16. I was able to learn how to regulate my emotions some other way, and there's other ways of managing that. What I'm struggling slightly to imagine that I can see the point, but I personally prefer sort of real time parent-child connection or real time friendships, learning to regulate in real time, because I understand the screens is another way of doing it, or the tech, but it's so easy, as you say, is to slip into a completely different room. It's a little bit like maybe going to a playground, but then it quickly becomes a nightclub, and then it quickly becomes something really dodgy. And it's the same interface. And I think that I find for a developing brain, that's growing, their impulse control is still developing. They don't have, that prefrontal cortex fully developed.
Yeah.
I think it's a really tall order on a child and the parent. And yet, this is what we all have to step into as parents. We have to accept, I think. We need to be on it. We need to be really aware of what our children are doing, and try and leverage the benefits. But I think it's not an easy task.
Look, it's not, look, I completely in agreement to everything you said when it comes to real world connection with your child. There's nothing like that. You can't replace that with a screen, you know. And in fact, there was a recent research that came out that basically showed that teenagers that have got or grown up with a weekly family routine tend to have lower anxiety levels, because this is basically time that they have spent bonding with their family and knowing that there's always going to be that safe space that they can come home to and so on. So there's no doubt, there's nothing that's going to replace the real life connection that you can have with your child. But when it comes to digital part of things, so there are two things here, right? So the one thing is that as a parent, a lot of parents feel overwhelmed because they don't know the digital spaces that their child is accessing. So
Mm,
this is the place where a little bit of an effort is needed, and you almost can't escape this part of it. But if, for example, if with any app or anything that your child's accessing, for example, you set the parental control settings in place, you understand what they're going. If it is a gaming platform, don't allow them to be on headphones. It has to be in a common area in your home. So, for example, in a living room, so not in their private bedrooms and things like that. So, if you have sort of, those things in place already, the physical things that you've done your best to be, to keep your child safe in this particular space, you can feel a bit more relaxed. But the next thing, right? What I would say is that 70%, maybe to up to 80%, the fear that parents have when it comes to online safety, right? You can minimize that, right? If you get two things just right, just two things. And one is addictive algorithm. And the second thing is chat with strangers. If you can eliminate these two things when it comes to the digital world, you can almost be 70% less fearful when it comes to your child being online. So addictive algorithms, you find that in, social media platforms, or you find in certain gaming platforms that basically keeps rewarding you to keep playing. And in chat features is basically, again, you find them in gaming platforms, and you can find them in like social media platforms. You find them also in private channels like Discord and Telegram. If you can tell yourself with any digital space that your child go to does not have those two things, right? You can feel less fearful. And then comes the other things like app purchases or violent content and so on, right? But those are the two things that you need to keep in mind first, and eliminate those two things when your child is going online first. And this is going to be age appropriate. So I'm talking about, the 7 to, your 13, 14, 15 years old, probably. When your child reaches a certain age, you can't control everything that they do online. But what you would expect at the time is that they have that real world connection that you said with you, that if anything happens, they are confident enough to come to you and talk to you about it. So yes, it feels that there is a lot of work that needs to be done when it comes to child going online, but we can't escape it. We need to put in that effort because they're going to keep growing up with this. You can only delay it for as long as you can. And then it comes to a certain point, say, for example, now with the social media ban and so on. When they're 16 and trying to control everything at the age of 16, that's going to be really hard as well, because like,
mm,
is 16 a magic number of maturity? That's something that we need to think about. Like what happens at 16 or what happens at 13 at this particular age that, that we're delaying access to all of this, which I'm in agreement with, to delay access until tech companies basically sort themselves out with the algorithms and, the violent content and harm and so on. But the
mm.
connection between you and your child, that real world connection, going back to that, is what really matters. But in between, you need to have your parental control settings. You need to patient going, and you need to have the basic things like, for example, no devices in the bedroom, and making sure that the apps that, or the places that your child are exploring, do not have those two things that I've just mentioned earlier. And that way you can be a little bit more assured that they are more likely going to be safe than not safe when it go online.
Yeah, got it. No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much. And your point that the point that was made that if that connection is strong, then children will come and tell their parents if there is something not quite right, or if some stranger has joined the game, they don't know who they are. You want a dynamic where the children will feel they can step forward and talk to their parents. So building that emotional connection where children aren't feeling scared to tell their parents, they're not feeling shame, they're not feeling embarrassed that they've done something wrong. I think normalizing even to our children that this is a tricky place. This is a quite a complicated place. You've not done anything wrong if something comes up, but do tell us because we love you no matter what. We're not going to tell you off. And that's a really tricky balance for parents because we need the boundaries there. And that boundaries does come with a bit of stern chat, but we need to get the balance right where we're not so stern that they don't even feel they can come and talk to us. So I think there's a bit of work there. And let's talk a little bit about social media, because obviously a lot's changing. I mean, we're recording this, it's end of January 2026, and every few days things are changing, right, on what we're hearing about the social media process and the sort of under 16 potential ban. Do you want to sort of just describe briefly, how we've got to where we are and what do you think and what's going to happen potentially moving forward?
Yeah, so you know what? I think since the Anxious Generation and Jonathan Haidt book came out, I think that has really caused a lot of stir in this space and a lot of, sort of awakening among parents, in terms of what's happening with their child's, screen time and, the influence of big tech companies on a lot of this and all of that. Australia first started it with the ban, which came about last year. Just before Australia implemented the ban, we had the Online Safety Act, early 2025 that came in place. And the purpose of the Online Safety Act is to, make the internet a safer place for children. Ofcom has introduced quite a number of things in place. So, for example, cyber flashing has been made illegal. Big tech companies now have a duty of care to make the algorithm safer for young users, age verification in place, and a couple of other things. It's been almost probably a year on since the Online Safety Act, but so far, besides the sort of the age verification and things like that, it's very hard to see how well the Online Safety Act has been sort of working for a lot of, for a lot of families because of the access to social media and things like that, which is still very open. So we are now at a place where, we've got the, smartphone free childhood movement, the delay smartphone movement that is gaining wage report as well. And we have now come to a point where a lot of, quite a number of parents have spoken out about losing their children because of social media. The Jules Law, Ellen and Esther, they were on, BBC just yesterday with Laura Kunsberg on, the effect of screen time on their children and they lost their son and things like that. So there's a lot of news about this whole thing. And, it's been brought to the House of Lords to ban social media. So the House of Lords has backed this ban and now it's going to move to the House of Commons. So for the next 6 months now, our ministers have a duty to basically have a consultation with experts, with parents, with teachers, leaders in this space to basically decide whether they want to go ahead with a ban or not with a ban. But there's a lot of pressure to go ahead with the ban, and I think it is just France just this morning who just announced they're fast tracking a social media ban as well in France because it was a really quite interesting headline where they say that our children's attention is not for sale or something like that. Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
where we are at right now. So I think the next 6 months is just going to be really crucial to see where we go and where we head with this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for summarizing that. Social media is defined as, is it specific apps? How are they going to define exactly what does social media mean?
So that's the part where we don't have clarification just yet. So for example, if they were to follow, say, Australia, then it's the main sort of social media apps like your Facebook and Snapchat and YouTube is in it as well, Instagram and TikTok and so on. But there are so many other smaller apps as well, which are not in the social media ban. So for example, when they were going to ban, Australia was going to ban the social media for children under 16, there was a rise in Lemonade and Red Note and few other smaller apps where, children started going to those smaller apps basically to keep their connection going. So we will have to basically wait and see what comes under social media apps,
Mm,
how well can basically, our laws keep up with the number of apps that's basically coming up all the time, whether the
mm,
smaller apps are in it or not. So right now, we don't have a definition of what are the exact apps that are going to be banned. And if you think about it, like we're banning social media, but then we've got so many other gaming platforms which have got the same features, addictive algorithm, violent, harmful content, ability to chat to strangers, but they are not being considered into this. It's just the social media that's being focused on for now. I think there is the part where like a lot of harm when it comes to online goes only on social media. The attention is there, but we've got other places as well where harm can happen. And the one thing that I sort of don't want to see is that while we ban social media, that a lot of parents then have the sort of state of mind that, well, now the digital space is safe for their children. In reality, it's not. That's just one aspect of it. So don't forget the rest of it that your child can be exploring online.
That is such an important point, and I couldn't agree more. And being really attuned to the fact that it's the addictive algorithms and they don't just sit in the social media space. And actually, the addiction piece of how the human brain is interacting with screens and the light and the way that impacts our sort of dopamine system, that is something that I think ideally more parents can understand. Because parents might well be getting really confused. Without understanding the science, I think it's quite hard to sort of stomach all this. And, a lot of people say, well, that's how my child connects. That is how they connect. Their friends are on this app, and that's the way they connect. And I think there's a lot going on here. And our children, unfortunately, it's a little bit like as tech companies are figuring this out, meanwhile, our children are going through this sort of guinea pig situation. And that's probably not the way it should be. Actually, that's wrong. And I think, as you say, that all needs to be sorted ASAP. And in the meantime, what can we as parents be doing? And you've given some amazing advice and amazing sort of areas for caution, and also areas for optimism. So thank you for that. And just tell us a little bit about how parents can get in touch with you if they wanted to sort of, how do you work? Do you have consultations with parents? Is that right?
Well, not right now, but we're launching something exciting. We're launching a parent app actually on the latest online safety news and trends to basically help parents keep up with everything that's going on in the online world. So we'll let you know once the app should be out in the next couple of weeks. So please do join us in the app and hopefully you can keep on top of this without being overwhelmed. And we've got like a net safe assistant as well to help you answer any questions you have. And you can get in touch with us, join any webinars that we might have on gaming, on so many different things. These are going to be like 20 minutes webinar just specific on particular topics and age group, and maybe loads in it as well. So yeah, but basically a way for you to not feel so overwhelmed, to know that there is help there.
Amazing. Well, thank you for building that. That sounds absolutely brilliant. That sounds like exactly what parents need. And then thank you. Thank you for coming on, for sharing such incredible insights. It was great to talk.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.